I just want to say really quickly, you're in your carport and the lighting keeps changing, and every now and then you're getting the sea of white with the car behind you, and it's really fun.
Yeah, the background is
Yeah,
either
yeah,
enveloped in a great halo
exactly.
or it comes back.
Like you're in the
So
afterlife or the in between station or something, with the car waiting there to take you wherever your next stop is. Just for context for people, like you and I know each other from Good Bad Art Collective in Denton. And God, it's been like 30 years, you
yep.
know. So I actually was looking at, I have a binder, a handy binder full of all the flyers and stuff from when I like the time that I was a member. And I was looking at them to just like refresh my memory this morning of like what our overlap was. And it was when I had already started working in publishing. Like I had graduated and then there was like a year that I still was in Good Bad and I did both for a while. So I wasn't as like present, you know.
Yeah. I was
Um,
intimidated by you.
were you? Why?
Yeah, because
Because you heard the rumors of how evil I was.
no, you didn't seem happy to be there at that point.
I
I mean,
wasn't.
there was obvious tension,
Yeah.
and it was, so I didn't really get to interact with you. I would
Yeah.
see you at the meetings, um, and that was it. So I knew who you were, but we
Yeah.
didn't really get to meet at that
Yeah.
time.
I was pulling away. There was a lot going on that I don't want to talk about on camera.
Yeah,
And I've made we have made peace, the people that were involved, and it was a long time ago, but it was there were a lot of challenges for me with it at that time. But I mean, I remember like you and Micah coming in and it was just like this sort of gang of fresh blood,
yeah.
and fresh air also. And you guys were very like performance oriented too. I mean, because you're a musician and you do a lot of, I don't know if you call it like noise art or
That's
whatever.
a noise is a very appropriate because I can't properly play anything.
Yeah.
And actually at that time I wasn't playing anything, no instruments whatsoever. It's been definitely Micah's been a big influence as far as actually playing and performing. And at that time I got, with electronics was just starting to understand what I was doing.
Hmm.
Since I was little, I would take stuff apart to learn how it worked. And then eventually I got to the point where I'd try and put it back together. First, it was just tear stuff apart, see how it worked. And then later it was put it back together. And then by the time I finally wound up in college, do you remember Chris Tenen? He was the one who helped me learn how to modify circuitry.
Hmm.
And after that was when I started circuit bending to make toys into instruments, basically.
Hmm.
And once that happened, then that's where Micah really became much more of, oh, you got to play this stuff. You need to, you know, make noise music with it. Cause the music scene was as big as the art scene in Denton, especially. I mean, I don't know if it ever has stopped. Before we got there, music and
Yeah.
art that's what Denton was.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it in Denton is when I actually started to get performing, playing stuff, but not before then. So it was like me being there and being, if I hadn't been in Good Bad, I doubt I would have ever gotten into that aspect of
Hmm.
things. And yeah, nowadays it's half art and half noise music. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's unplanned. One of those things that I discovered. while I was in Denton.
I didn't realize that that was sort of the origin of it.
Oh yeah. Yep. I still
Yeah.
can't play to this day.
Yeah. But I'm gonna share at least a little snippet of one of your videos on YouTube, and I'll point people to your channel too. But
It's
there was like a
it's all
rhythm,
over
and
the
then
place. It I will say it is very varied. Like what, if it's music stuff, if it's art stuff, if it's art stuff is, it's not easily, I can't think of the right.
categorizable or
Yes,
whatever the word is. I'm not sure if
ex-
that's the
ex-
right how you would modify
exactly.
that word,
It's
but
I'm fortunate to be able to work in wood, in metal, in fabric, in all, several different materials. And so that's where, yeah, it's to look back across like a retrospective of what I've done, and it's never been just specifically isolated to just one thing. It's
Mhm.
always been growing and influenced by, hey, what's a woodworking technique that I can use over in a different material? And I'm a problem solver is what I would
Mhm.
mostly say. It's dream up an idea. Okay, how do you make it happen?
Yeah.
And having been just a sponge since I was a kid for learning about things and paying attention to little details and all the this, that, and the other. I've learned how to adapt things. Oh,
Yeah.
I don't have the right tool or the preferred material. Well, what can I substitute that will work? And then that becomes a new thing. And then it
Right.
becomes exploring the technique or the material and then incorporating that later where I'm dealing with some new problem and I remember a solution to something well in the past. Oh yeah, I can bring that in and try that. And so it's being able to just constantly grab from like a catalog of how did I fix this? How did I deal with that? On top of having a somewhat of a goal of what this new, and I'd leave it vague just because that's kind of it fits multiple things,
Yeah.
whether it's a hard physical object or a fabric thing or electronic. Is it visual? Is it audio? It's
Yeah.
all of those kinds of things. Because like I will say with the music stuff, since I sit there and say I can't play anything, I cannot pick up a guitar and play chords,
Yeah.
but I can arrange samples of sounds and I can make a controller that will do composition
Yeah.
for me.
That's what I was
And
saying. Like you're making
it's
music, even if you're not acknowledging to yourself because it's not traditional,
exactly, yeah.
like you are making music. I mean, there's
And so the whole the aspect of making the controller that controls the sounds for the music, the algorithms for how that's working, because it's all code-based software. Um, I've utilized that for the visual stuff with the knitting, making some of the pattern generation visually. I just approach it the same way I did with music stuff,
yeah.
where I've got a sample, an audio, something audible, and it's being chosen for me and repeated. Well, now I've got a visual image and I write code that it grabs those and it starts arranging them. And so there's definitely, for me, yeah, everything is kind of pulls from everywhere and crosses over and I grab what I need when I need it. And sometimes I, don't have I'm comfortable in not knowing from the start what the end is and just kind of pulling as I need it and letting
Mhm.
it kind of work itself in. I definitely always have constraints, like ultimate constraints, but I don't start out with an ideal image and go directly to that. It's always a bit of a what problem am I going to run into that I'm not aware of at
Yeah.
this. I'm it's more of that understanding of there's gonna be problems and that's okay. It's you got to just getting around those, past those. That's the goal.
Right.
It's not just immediately knowing. I do step one, two, and three, and then I have art. That's not how it works for me.
Right. Well, do you think that I mean, because when we kind of started on that thread, it was because you were saying that your work is like extremely varied. There was like a little bit of a tone, and maybe I was reading into it that sounded as if you felt like that maybe wasn't such a great thing.
I,
That your work, that you don't fit into like a specific
oh
category
no,
with your
I
work.
love it.
Okay, good. Because
I
I feel
totally,
like that's your strength. I mean, and just like
yeah,
over the years, as I've
I
watched
embrace
your
that.
stuff, it's like I'm always like, what's Marshall doing right now? Because you're just like
Who knows?
this creative deluge, you know, it's like whether it's working on your house or like, you know, music or art or like whatever it is, you're just like always making something, like always making
Yes.
something. And it's so lovely to watch it, you know?
Thank you. I appreciate that because I get one of two responses to things is either it's expected that I'm a workaholic, which I'm not, or it's I'm told that I'm inspirational to people because they
Mhm.
just see this constant basically a constant output of
Yeah.
stuff from me. And the trick to the constant output is I finally reached a point where I didn't have to do a task to completion before moving to another task. For a long time, that was, and I think
Yeah.
that's something that a lot of people have that kind of, I've got to get from one to the next, to the next, to the next.
Yeah.
And I kind of reached a point where as you're working on one thing, if you try that approach and you, oh, there's something, a part I have to order and wait for. Well, now you're pushing out your deadline or if you have a deadline, is being hampered by that. And I
Hmm.
had enough of that going on that I started trying to work more modular, where I could have multiple projects and have some kind of priority list. And as one would hit some kind of pausing point, well, I just shifted over to the next one.
Yeah.
And that for me, that's how I'm able to do as much as I do is I've got my high priority, but there's several different things I can kind of shuffle between. And I
Yeah.
do still get to have downtime and relax time. It's not this manic, got to be working.
Yeah.
I enjoy the work. I enjoy when something is completed. There's choices I make that cause me to have to deal with situations, and then there's things that life just hands me. So
Yeah.
it's that kind of balance of stuff is I try to not have too many like super strong obligations to like other people
Yeah.
because that's where you get stressed. So it's having that flexibility for me. I mean, making art is it's pretty, I would even say rare that I make a specific object and call it art.
Hmm.
Anything I make, I put in the same level of interest and dedication
Yeah.
for just everyday objects.
Yeah.
Um, and then it's just kind of that's what my life has become. It's constantly infused. I don't seek out showing in places. I don't look for stuff of that, you know. If it comes to me, cool. That and it does now and it works in. So I try and balance it out. So yeah, I'm constantly working on stuff. I do have a feeling of I was late to the game. Getting into art didn't, I when I graduated high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And but a friend of mine, he was natural artist, could
Hmm.
just like Micah, could pick up a Sharpie and just draw anything. And to me at that time, that was an art. That was being an artist. You just did it. And I hadn't taken classes in school. That was where my mindset was, oh, to go into art, I should have already been getting the training. I should have already had classes. And
You felt
so,
that way going into college?
yeah, I was like, I didn't prepare myself. It's like if you're going to be a doctor, you're
Yeah.
going to start early with that
Yeah, I think
focus. And
that's
I,
like a really screwed up symptom of the world we live in, that
oh yeah,
we groom children to try to feel like they need to know what they're going to do for the rest of their life when they're teenagers, you know,
oh yeah,
and whether that's like explicitly coming from some adults or the school or whatever, or if it's just like something that we absorb. Like, I think that that's totally screwed up. We don't like, we shouldn't have to know what we're gonna do,
right. And I still
and we
didn't. So
should
like
be able to change our mind.
I mean, that was heading toward college, and I tell myself I can't go and do art because I don't have the training at that point, whatever that would have been.
Yeah,
And instead I go to college for like 2.5, 3 years, changing my major each year, changing my school, going to several places around Texas. And then I took time off and spent like 2.5 years. A friend had a small shop out in Frisco back when Frisco was nothing.
yeah,
Out at an airport, he had a small shop and we worked on cars. And I did that for a few years, and then I was like, I've got to go and get a degree, because it was still that other mindset that we were told is, you get a degree if you want a real job.
hmm,
And at that point, I was going to be paying for it. And I said, I'm going to get an art degree. If I'm paying for it, I'm choosing. My parents never said no to art. I never asked about art back
yeah,
when they were paying. But so now it was my decision. And that's when I decided, hey, I'm going to do this. And wound up in Denton, had a few friends I knew from high school who were still there. And
hmm,
this is, like 5, 6 years after graduating high school. A few people are there. And that was also right when the Argo was being worked on. It hadn't
yeah,
opened yet. And one of my high school friends knew Rob and Chris and introduced me and was like, this is Marshall. He can build stuff. And so I started working, helping them out. And then the next thing I know, Martin shows up and he's like, hey, would you like to come to some meetings?
yeah.
And so that for me, that's how everything's just
I
kind
was
of,
gonna ask you how you kind of got pulled into that group, but like that
yeah, it
makes
was
so much sense, because I'm just gonna tell you, we desperately needed people who not only had the skills, but would actually show up and do work, you know, like, because there was always work to do after every show.
oh
Um,
yeah.
and in preparation for every show. So yeah,
And it
I'm
was, I mean,
sure Martin was
de-
like, who's this guy Marshall?
definitely for me. I mean, good, bad for me was a wonderful experience. Lots of, I mean, if everything had been as it was and you removed good, bad from the picture, I don't think that I would have finished art at that time.
Yeah,
Because good, bad was really what informed me that even though I didn't have the background that I thought this mystical background had to be there,
right.
I had practical skills. And I mean, because I grew up not rich, but not poor, and had to figure, if I wanted something, I had to figure out how to do it or make it myself. And so that was, something again, very fortunate. I started woodworking in junior high school.
Hmm.
So being able to, figure out how to make something out of wood, I could do that. And, I'd had to do electrical work in the house.
Yeah,
They needed something wired up. Okay. And that was, yeah, a big part with good, bad was since we had that collective, all these individuals with ideas, some people had visions, but no understanding about how to execute it.
right.
And so it's definitely where I fit in for that. And, it suddenly opened up to me. I realized that there wasn't that mystical necessary training.
Yeah,
I fortunately I understood design and I understood core aspects of what art is and can be.
Mhm.
And so instead of someone needing something and I can only build it one way that's clunky and ugly, I was actually able to already kind of work in what's pleasing to the eye, what is,
Yeah.
going to help out. And so I didn't even know it. And I had basically all it was like Karate Kid, where I thought I was doing one thing and
Right.
really I was building a magic bag of tricks
Right.
basically.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Good Bad just unlocked it with, like you said, there's always something going on. And I'm a big believer in, if you don't know how to do something, you need to try it. And then that kind of gives you a baseline of what your incoming ability or aptitude is.
Mhm.
And then you just repeat and you'll improve.
Yes.
And so I think, for me, that's why Good Bad was just like this wonderful experience of
Yeah. I
constant challenges and opportunities and and just the
and
honesty.
crazy, fun, insane shit going on.
I mean, totally thinking out of I thought that I used to think out of the box, and then all of a sudden it's like I'm meeting other people that are taking it even
Oh,
further.
yeah.
And it would, a lot of times it would become this kind of collaborative, it starts out with one idea and then you add to it and then you adjust it and then you put some practicality to it and then you're like, well, let's revise it. And it just goes back and forth until it becomes something that none of the initial people had an idea about. I can't, again, I don't really remember anyone's vision that they would share what the completed thing was, it being like a one for one. There was
Mhm.
always some expansion that basically made it more than and made
Right.
it better. So,
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
I mean, I'm so happy to hear you say that. Honestly, that is extremely rewarding for me to hear that it had that kind of impact on your life, you know?
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I like, yeah, I couldn't have hoped for anything better than to know that it like it gave people like a sense of uh purpose in a way and like direction that you continued on, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Now, the other thing that it also taught me is I have no interest in joining a makerspace. I have no
Yeah,
no interest in because it's an evolution in size scale. It's
right.
like take Good Bad, and because Good Bad was, it could have been a bomb. It was,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
membership would ebb and flow. And in the time while I was there, there was kind of like a core for most of that time.
Mhm.
But but that was the wonderful thing about it, is that there wasn't a requirement to be allowed in. It was, hey, just come in. And
Mhm.
if you work out, you work out. And so there
Yeah.
wasn't like a lot of craziness, but there was from time to time, some tension, but that's
Yeah.
personalities. And that can happen not necessarily in an art collective space. That happens at work. That happens at
Oh,
the
it happens
grocery store.
everywhere.
That
Yeah.
happens. Yeah. So it's
Um, and there was no sort of conventional structure.
true.
So
Exactly.
that was a benefit for us because it gave us freedom, but it also sometimes like
Made it too wild a
created
little
an
bit.
atmosphere where everybody was just bumping into each other, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Because
And
I mean, if it was, especially when we started doing stuff outside of our space,
yeah,
when we were doing shows in other places, because then it has to be more of there has to be a point person
yeah,
that interacts with the outside of the
yes,
group to arrange that. If it's inside of our space, yeah, that was total chaos. And
yeah,
you want to do that, go right ahead and try it out, see how it
right,
works out. And that
right,
was wonderful to have that opportunity.
yeah,
But at the same time, hey, we're being invited to go down somewhere else, and they kind of know what we do, but not exact, like the Red Rover show with where we were recreating I can't remember his last name, the truck driver Larry, who did all of the weather balloons and the lawn chair. Those people didn't know what we were bringing with us,
Right.
going down there with all those balloons, and we didn't know what we were doing either, because
Yeah.
it technically failed, but you know, just what it was, the event aspect of it. Who does that? I mean, it was, and now it's, you can't recreate it now because I mean, the world has just changed
You can't even
too
get a
much.
space, first of all, because,
Well,
you know, I mean,
I mean, that and just the way that people's reception to it. Now that I mean, YouTube, you've got people who, in a sense, they take that essential freedom and they're just doing everything everywhere all the time.
yeah,
So now it's gotten to a point where everyone is so bombarded, potentially bombarded by someone else has already done it. Someone's done something similar to it. But back 30 years ago, you had not a restriction necessarily, but you didn't have the same information availability. So you
mhm,
didn't know what was happening in other places as
right.
much. And so you could have these ideas that seemed, you know, massive. In the big picture, they really weren't. That was more of a condition of, I think, time and space and awareness of
Mhm.
what you knew of. So in that sense, that's where I'm saying things we did back then, I can't see them working today because I'm aware of what's going on and all of this. There's, I mean, the whole art market and how that works is, you know, back when 30 years ago when I got my diploma and I'm now officially an artist and I can go out and get with a gallery and have that opportunity. If I get popular, I'm basically set in whatever style or medium made me
Yeah.
popular. You couldn't risk venturing to something else too far, or you would lose the value of your previous art objects and collectors thing. You know, it was like
There
you
is a
were,
pressure like that. I
yeah.
mean, historically, many of the greats, which is we'll just acknowledge is a very exclusive club that has been limited to a certain, group of people. But a lot of those people just bounced all over the place, and that was their strength. I mean, Picasso, for one,
Oh,
everybody has heard of Picasso in the whole world. Like he had a bazillion styles,
yeah, you can't,
and
when you think of Picasso, you can't think of just one. It's like you said, I mean, he
yeah,
was known because of the variety.
yeah. But I'm sure like in 2024, he probably might get some flack from whoever's representing him for, like not producing what the collectors are expecting to buy. Um, yeah, there's a
I
lot
mean,
of there's a lot of issues, certainly.
well, I mean, now it's possible now to not even be with the gallery, and you still have to have an audience who will pay so that you can pay your bills and everything. But it's just the ability to self promote, to be able to
Yeah.
reach, you know, someone who wants to buy your work can see it on a computer, you can interact, you can ship it to them,
You
whatever.
you
So it's
also, I
that,
don't think, have to rely so much on the sale of a physical object because there's so many like alternative economies out there
exactly,
now. Like
yeah.
you mentioned people on YouTube, and this is going on YouTube and it's not monetized, but maybe someday it might be, you know.
I mean,
I mean, there's
the
a
ability,
lot of things that people can do that are like adjacent to their practice and that don't like take energy away from that actually sort of enhances it. And I think that's going to be different for every single person. But um like in a way, I feel like the time that we're living in is similar to the chaotic time that we, like you and I, felt in Good Bad, where it was just sort of like anything goes. It's all about experimentation and you have an idea, let's try it, let's do this, and it's the same thing now. It's like the rules are shifting so
Oh
fast,
yeah.
so
Yep.
dramatically, and there's so many new avenues to explore that, you can look at that as intimidating and overwhelming, or you could look at it as a playground, you know?
I'm curious about, so there's the opportunity for individuals to make a living without being represented by a gallery. What I'm interested in is what the sustainability is, because it's still bound by, you make an object, there needs to be a collector who's willing to pay money for that,
Yeah.
so that's where I am curious about. There's this awesome thing about the freedom of, now you can make whatever you want. But you don't have to be pigeonholed into a particular thing like how it used to be with a gallery.
Yeah.
But will there always be an audience for you? Is this going to be, that's where I'm interested in an artist from who went through what we did the walk through the steps to be an artist and be with a gallery, and that's their career, versus someone who just gets to put up a website, and I'm not even speaking of the quality of what they make. Is it even good art? It's
Mhm.
because you can be a hack, and as long as you got a good distribution of
Yeah.
people out there who are willing to
I
pay.
think that's always been true, though.
Exactly, but yeah, now it's easier now.
If
You're
we're
not you're
gonna
not
be
just.
real honest about it.
And speaking of that, actually, I've always loved street art where it's just fantasy planets, and they're out on the street and they got their gimmick. It's all technique,
Uh-huh.
but it's following those basic principles of art, of good design, good balance, good flow.
Yeah.
And it's just, there's, in a sense, it's just not mechanized, but they don't put their heart and soul into it because they're looking to make rent or food or whatever. But the ability to make that object that is just like breathtaking, it's art, but it's not in a gallery. I've always loved street art, especially
Yeah.
just fantasy planet. So it's like, oh, they
Yeah.
put a lid, they put their lid from their spray can down and they shoot around it, and then they
Right.
it's like all technique. And
Yeah.
so to call out a particular person, I'm sure you know who Clay Stennant
Yeah.
in Fort Worth.
Mhm. I
He
don't know him, but I know of him. Yes.
apparently he wound up in Denton like right after so you left Denton when I kind of got there, and then
Mhm.
when I left Denton like 6 years later, Clay got there. Clay is an example of, I mean, just his variety of work. If you aren't following him on social media, I'd really recommend it for the energy that he just does. He'll share 20 prepped canvases, pretty small ones, that are in his studio, and he's like, time to get to work. And it's all like alien cowboys, just like, what? And the style of them is that he just sits there and cranks out a whole big series. And then a couple days later, he's got, fewer but larger canvases that are some other, and it's not what you expect. I never know what to expect with him. It's always great that I never know. It's always
Right.
like, oh, Clay is doing something else. He has this boundless energy that he's always producing in volume, and stylistically, it's not the same tired thing.
Well,
And
you're
even when he
describing
does,
him in the way that I described you earlier.
and I was kind of just realizing that
Yeah.
is, I think
It's
that's
like,
one of the things I identify with him, is just that it's just constant, but it's not static.
yeah.
There's variety in the volume, and we have a couple of his paintings that it's wonderful to just see that with someone who I've met him a couple times, but knowing he's an actual person, he's not just a figure on the internet who I'll never meet. This is a real person, and we have many friends in common.
Mhm.
And he's, it's just it adds an extra something to it. But he is constantly hustling. He's got to always be produced, and that's, I think any artist today, that it's you're always working. And so he's got that drive, he's got vision, he's got
Yeah.
abilities. It's really cool to be able to see
Yeah.
that
I
happening.
so like a few things that like everything that we've talked about so far, there's like 10 directions that I want to go in.
That's
So
how my
like right
brain
now,
is.
um like whenever we're attracted to a person in any capacity or what they're doing or whatever, it's because they have some sort of quality that um we want to like feel in ourselves, or we already have that quality, and so there's that connection and we want to nurture that particular thing. um and I think that's part of like the pull for me, like over the years watching you do that, because there's like I also have to have a lot of different things going on at once. Like I can't just have like you said earlier, like this, and then I've got to finish it before I get to the next thing. Like I need to have several like stations, like if it's kindergarten where I can like go work on this, and then I can like, and it's totally a in the moment feeling based, like this is where I am right now and this is what I'm going to work on. And then I will have intense focus while I'm in that space, to the point where like you just used the word hustle, and I'm actually totally an anti-hustle. Like I'm a strong believer in downtime because I have to have it. And if I don't, I will like burn out like
Oh
quick,
yeah.
because the focus is so intense that then I have to just be like, okay, now I have a week where I just don't produce anything, and I just like, you know, go hiking or like go socialize or like rest or whatever it is. Um, I have like a very specific rhythm creatively that's just like intense and then pull away and then intense and then, but that like productive area is full of a lot of little different things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I think like what you're talking about with clay and what you're doing, even if the rhythm isn't the same, it's the same sort of like you know I don't know what to call it. It's just like got to have a lot of things going on in order to keep your creativity from stagnating.
No, I mean, I understand what you're saying and I agree with it. And it also fits the reality that everyone's different. There's,
Mhm.
whatever you have in common with other people, there's always going to be those differences. And yeah, people have to. So that's the other thing, Clay also shows us pictures of when he goes on trips and he's on vacation, and he gets to do that quite often as well. So it's like, I definitely don't look at him in a sense of envy or anything, as far as like, oh man, he can produce. I wish I could produce that much all the time. It's, man, it's impressive what he puts out, the quality of it.
Mhm.
And he's also able to, like you said, step back and do what he needs to do, so that when he needs the energy to put into art, he has it because he recharges batteries.
Yeah.
For me, that's something that I don't really share. That one, I don't do vacations. I never grew
Yeah.
up with vacations, but I definitely, the way that if I looked at a single day in my life, what it breaks down over, there's definitely periods throughout the day where it's almost like micro breaks for me. That if you had a bar graph or pie chart for your day, I definitely am working in some getting away time where it's
Mhm.
not just a, because yeah, you can, that's where definitely, like I said before, having a deadline, having something that needs to be done, that's where it's really draining, because
Yeah.
then you tend to not take the breaks, and it's all that focus and intensity. That's where you can definitely ultimately fail at everything. You
Yeah.
don't complete the thing, and you don't get the rest, and then you feel bad, and that's not fun. So it's like I ultimately want art to be enjoyable and be fun and be uh one thing to inspire a bigger thing in the brain.
Right.
I never want it to be just here's one goal, and once I attain that, I can just get rid of everything I have. It's that thing is like, oh, that happened. And then a little bit later, the next, an evolution from that, some kind of
Right.
morphing. So like a minute ago, you were talking about, as we're talking, so many things are have the potential to just branch off into other
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
That's how my brain works, and it always has. And again, it's over time, I just found what worked for me is like kind of prioritizing. So if I have some kind of idea and I'm like, oh, there's like three new things that have come from that one thing, I'll make a list and like jot down, because I've also learned if I don't jot it down,
Yeah.
I'll forget it. And then it'll take even longer to bubble back up and surface back up. But I really like trying to explore those, something branches. I want to see what all of those paths, because each of those paths then branch.
Right.
And just the modular nature of that. And then for me, that loops back into the music stuff with the making modular instruments from toys,
Yeah.
and that it influences the visual work as well. A lot of it is modular type things. So it's, for me, it's all encapsulating. There's constantly contradictions, there's constantly new potential branches. And I've just learned to just kind of pull back and just, for me, instead of intently focusing on something, I'm one of those people that like kind of, I've had bad vision my whole life. So this
Mhm.
sense of letting stuff get kind of murky and blurred, out of focus, let it out of focus
Yeah.
will actually influence later. So it's kind of like taking a break. That it's a lot of my stuff is also, once the seed is planted, I try to not focus on it. I let other things happen, because no matter what I'm working on, whatever's been planted is it's germinating on its own, and it'll kind of come to on its own. And since I'm constantly working on different things, it'll come back around. And it's like I've found I've been more pleased with the outcome from that approach than trying to sit down and, oh, here's the plan, gonna dut dut dut. No,
Right.
that it's as I've collected more and more information and just all this stuff, I try to throw it all together in a big pot and see what stuff, without really focusing on it, kind of what it builds inside on its own, and what it decides to poke me in the head with and say, hey, what, check out this idea.
So there was something you said, like, I'm going to kind of go back when you were talking about um just like when you were younger and your perception around what you needed to have in terms of like your skill and your training in order to pursue being an artist. Um and then when I mentioned Picasso earlier, it made me remember this, that we there's this idea out there of artistic genius, and that like people are born with it or they're not, and that's it, you know? And there's also a thing that happens in like child development, that like around the tween years, um everybody like transitions from that like fantastical sort of imaginative childhood drawing that we do into wanting to represent realism. And there are, yeah, like you said, Micah, um, Adam, my daughter, like a lot of people in this world who can pick up a marker and just like, and then there are those of us who need to like scribble and like smudge and like, you know, like finesse it and like get it there. But like, there are a lot of people too who could do it if they just, like you said, put in the time of practicing. Like it's just like learning any other kind of skill. And I've seen it happen like with my eyes, you know, other people in my life that felt like they had zero artistic ability. And then they start doing stuff and it improves, you know, and all of a sudden they're like creating things that they never thought they could. And that myth of like the creative genius, like, and yeah, yes, there are like all of us, I think, have innate skill sets that we gravitate to and that come easier for us. But like for the most part, it's very fluid too. And it's another, I think that's just like one more area that like what we were talking about earlier, that the cultural expectations around art have like done a real disservice to people. Um, and I think that that also feeds into just, I'm totally going off in some
No,
other
I agree
realm
with
right now, but it's like
everything you say, I
it
agree with.
it
So,
it this whole like disconnect between like the broader culture and art and the art world um is informed and fed by that myth, I think, because I think that like what happens is what in those tween years when people hit that point and all of a sudden they're not performing or producing in the way they think they should, like it's not meeting their expectation, and they detach, and oftentimes uh they build a, sometimes it's like as much as a resentment, and sometimes it's just like a complete like lack of interest, which is also fine because we can all have different interests. But um I just think it's a big like, it's a, I don't know, there's a lot of like inconsistent messaging in the art world too, like some people want it to be elitist, you know,
yep.
and inaccessible to the general public, and some people would like to like make inroads there, and I'm definitely like one of those in the latter group. Like I would like there to be more people in the world who are interested in art and also nurturing their own practice, you know, in whatever way they choose to do so. um so I just kind of, coming from that point, because it came up twice in my mind, that whole myth of the creative genius, like felt I needed to say all that out loud. And now you're completely bathed in a white light, which seems very appropriate. Seems like a good place for me to end my soapbox.
Well, no, I'm just going to add on that, everything you said, I totally agree with. And, that's being the person I am, who has always, since I was a little kid, picked up on little details, and not obsessively, not OCD, but more than I think most people typically do. Have kind of seen, there's so many, it's almost like like we said before, you have an idea and then there's all these possibilities for branching out. I see a similar thing with, children at a certain age. What kind of influence are they getting?
Mhm.
Is it a parent who thinks that you're supposed to, oh, you're at this age, you got to put those toys away. That's you get promoted up or whatever, that just the level distinctions of being a human, being a kid, getting older, that there's certain ideas. So it's like, yeah, in some houses, you're going to have a parent who's going to define for the child where their focus, what they think that focus should be. And you'll get various different degrees even within that approach. You
Yeah.
know, in our family, it's been we never stopped supporting creativity. And I mean, I would be the biggest hypocrite if I did that, because I'm constantly doing so. I'm hoping to at least influence my kids with, you don't ever have to stop thinking creatively.
Hmm.
It's useful if you can apply that in a way that in some practical manner, be it a career or a job. With everything, there's always, each situation is unique and different, and influences and the determination of the individual to push back. If you've got a parent who's going to define what what they think their kid should be doing, does that kid have an inner voice that's going to, like, no, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing? It's like,
Yeah.
then, so I see, I agree with what you're saying, and I see it even potentially fractured even more of,
Hmm.
well, now you got this situation. And that's, again, that's how my brain works, of looking at why does something happen and trying to figure it out. And at the same time, I fortunately am aware of, there's only so you can collect all the data you want from different situations, and there's still going to be a wild card factor in there. That's part of why the world is not totally predictable in every way. It's you're working within margins. It's some acceptable percentage of the expected outcome goes this way or that way. But there's always that chance that no matter how much you've researched and collected and analyzed and simulated, you get something you didn't expect. And that's beyond just art. It's like, that's to me one of the great things about life, is that surprise. Hopefully it's a positive thing.
Yeah.
that's but it's like, having fears about the world and how things are going to go. It's like, some people are more easily led than others into being coerced into joining an idea, or a bigger group's idea, just because. And the rough thing in life is, the people who have become more and more aware of how easy it is to manipulate others to follow them. And again, that can be taken in many different levels. It's not one specific thing. That's how life has always been. Manipulation, even with art, is.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that I wanted to say with art. For me, I we're about the same age. When we were each introduced to art, as like being told, oh, this is art, versus it's just it's like you're a kid and the world's just happening around you.
Yeah.
You're not always aware of specific huge things. For me, I was seeing art from the past. My parents didn't take me to museums. We didn't, it was not a nurturing environment in that regard for arts and humanities.
Hmm.
It was just, I was kind of on my own, and I just saw stuff. So I was seeing Picasso. I remember we had a puzzle of Pollock. Yeah, I mean, it was my exposure to art was not like intentional. It wasn't like, this is art. It was just, it was there and I saw it. And so I kind of just absorbed it on my own without really being aware of what was there. I came to the realization that no matter what you intend as an artist, you have to contend with the audience. Unless you're doing something that is so in your face, explanatory piece of work, what your intentions are, sometimes, I mean, it's what the audience takes away from it.
Yeah.
If you're an artist who has a very specific knowledge and a very specific interest, and you put all of that energy into a single piece, what does the audience are they going to get? Do they just dislike the color you used? Do they, it's you have no control over what your audience takes away from what you create.
Right.
Um, and that was something that I became aware of on my own before. This was why I was saying about seeing the Pollock puzzle, seeing Picasso, seeing all these big artists when I was a very young child and not understanding anything about it. I didn't know what those things, I didn't understand the importance, the significance of these pieces I was seeing as a child. I saw them what my brain thought of them. That Pollock puzzle was just like all of the paint just everywhere. I thought it was just a puzzle. I didn't realize it was Jackson Pollock,
Yeah.
that he made paintings,
Yeah.
action paint, manly action paintings. It's a puzzle.
Right.
So it's there's, I think that's something with art that some people who choose to wear the title of artist don't understand is you have your intentions, but the audience, they might not care about that
Yeah.
specifically.
They
They,
probably don't.
you know, I'm someone who, if a piece of art isn't well balanced, if the composition isn't there, then I try to approach everything as just, what do we got? Where are we going to look at?
Hmm.
And if there's those basic foundational elements missing, I immediately downgrade what I'm looking at, because it's
Yeah.
like, man, they hopefully they will improve upon those things. I think
Yeah.
that if they do have an intention or a message or a focus in their work, that if they could get the basics down, that it'll continue to evolve and grow and improve and stuff. Because we don't need so many artists in the world. We need influence of creativity. We need people to be more open to imagine, like letting their imagination
Yeah.
grow.
And I think when you were saying that earlier about like people being easily manipulated in some cases, I feel like that where that comes from, if you're going to distill it down to like some sort of core essence, because I think it happens across the spectrum of people, across ideologies and cultures and all of that, it's like, um, it comes from a place of not being able to imagine something different than what you've experienced and know. And so that's where the fear comes in for a lot of people, because if they, I mean, because the unknown is scary for one thing. And if you come from some sort of background where there's, it's like a punishment system or a power system where there's like a very specific hierarchy and the people at the bottom are going to get like squashed, like it's hard to imagine a more like equitable system where no one's getting squashed, um, and that other people who think differently from you, that's not their goal, is to take power and then wield it rather than to share it. Um, and I think that honestly, like, um, the arts, it doesn't have to be visual art, and just it doesn't even have to be the arts, honestly, because there's creativity in everything. There's creativity in science and engineering and math and like all of it, you know. But if we as a collective human race could somehow find it within ourselves to allow space for the unknown and for creativity, and to nurture that and to take the fear away from it, that in the like utopia world of my brain, um that's becomes possible, you know. um there was something else you were saying in there that, oh, the when you're talking about, just like the intention not always, artistic intention not always matching the reception of the audience. And I mean, I think, yeah, that's like another myth that's out there, that like an artist creates the work and it means this thing, and then they put it into the world and people have to figure out what is that thing that it means, and it needs to like match what the artist meant. Like, but that can be coming from the artist, like that perception, and that can be coming from the audience. Like there's a disconnect there, when in reality everything is multi-layered and multi-dimensional, and like all of it's valid too. It's like when you or I as an artist are creating something, like in the process of creating, we're getting something out of that. When it's completed, we're getting something else out of it. 5 years down the road, we're going to get something else out of it. It's just like always shifting, even for the person who created it. And
Absolutely.
like the whoever it is that's viewing or interacting with it, uh like everyone has their own very unique set of life experiences and perspectives, that they're going to get whatever they need and are capable of at that moment that they're interacting with it. And then again, that may change, like, you know, if they, like, a good example of this in my mind is the Judd stuff out at Marfa at Chinati, like those boxes, the whatever they
Yep.
call it, 100 untitled works and whatever, still aluminum, I don't know. um like the first time I visited was like in the 90s when Chinati was new, and um I was freshly out of art school, and I had like a very academic response to that work. And then over the years, as I have visited it, you know, other times, like my perception of that work has actually, like, I didn't really care for it, to be honest. Like I was never into Judd back in the 90s. And part of that was because of like some voices that existed in my head, you know, in my community, that were very toxic masculinity. We're just going to use that phrase, even though I know at this point it's like beating a dead horse, you know, but like it was very macho, and I was reacting against that. I didn't really care for it. And but now, like, I love going in that room and being in there, and for me, it's all about, like, what's the light doing that day? What's the color of the light? Like, where am I emotionally? How has this shifted? How have I shifted since the last time this happened? How is each one of those boxes, like, totally different, even though they look the same, you know? Like, in my mind, that's a good metaphor for, like, what we're talking about, that um things aren't static. Like art isn't static, and it doesn't have to be a steel box. It can be anything, you know. um so I think that, like, yeah, that, like, learning as an artist to detach from that expectation that, like, I'm creating this thing and it means this. And then also for the audience, the general public, once again, to learn to detach from that too, because then it removes this, like, um very narrow critical focus on like whether something is successful or not, or good or bad, like, you know, because all that's a spectrum. So
Exactly.
yeah.
I will say it's funny that you bring up Judd in the boxes, because that was for me. I love those pieces.
Hmm.
Never seen them in person, just seen pictures and books. But when I saw those, this is before I was going to go to school for art. This is when
Yeah.
I was still probably a teenager, is when I saw, I think, the first time his work. But it didn't really, no, it must have been closer to college, because it was when I saw his work. That's another thing that's crazy about art, is that when you look at the timeline of art and art
Hmm.
history, and you had the major movements and how long they existed, and the next movement would come as a reaction to the
Yeah.
movement before it. And as it gets closer to current times, it they get smaller, the movements, and it splinters more. It's not just a single reaction to what came before, and you started getting this. I mean, the ball was starting to roll really slow, and as it gets closer to us, it's going so fast, and there's so many things that have happened, and so
Yeah.
many reactions to that. And
Yeah.
so, but knowing, when I didn't know anything about art, but seeing his work and learning that he didn't make them himself. He was not proficient at, manufacturing.
Hmm.
He hired someone to do it. And it's also kind of like Warhol with, I mean, just the mass production of
Yeah.
art. But with Judd in particular, I've always loved fabricated objects, especially ones that are more generic. I talk a lot with Micah. We always talk about minimalism is the hardest thing to pull off, because that lack of basically everything, you're trying to reduce it down, everything is exposed. When you add flourishes to things, it hides imperfections. But when you're going minimal, and it's like, I pay attention to things like how light shines on, if it's a flat piece of metal. I mean,
Yeah.
I do it all the time. I do it all the time with cars, and
Yeah.
especially to see where there's a dent or something like that. And if this is going to be art, I'm going to expect it to be pristine and perfect. And if the artist is not, say, a metal worker, but they can afford to have someone else produce their vision, that was like, blew my mind, that you could have an artist who didn't make the thing themselves. That helped me kind of get in a better headspace with art in general, that I didn't have to have a particular, prerequisite completed before I went into art. Because that, again, where did that whole idea, I don't know
It's
where
another very,
that,
very entrenched myth that
yeah.
has to be created by the artist's hand. And I really appreciate stuff where you can see the artist's hand. Like I like flaws and imperfection, and like I want to see that. Um I can also appreciate when it's very clean and pristine. But yeah, it's another pervasive myth. And I mean, honestly, it's like it go like in the Renaissance, like the old masters, like they had a shop, like they had people working underneath them who they had trained that were actually painting the stuff, like they painted some stuff too, but they had a whole team of people, you know.
And then there's also the potential. Like, I've always appreciated craftsmanship, someone
Hmm.
who is very knowledgeable with whatever the material is. But you can also just as easily get someone who is almost just, they are able to execute things to such a level, but they lack creativity. So it's like, you ask them to do this specific task, and oh, they can knock it out exactly,
Yeah.
but they can't be creative. They can't, so there's always these. So, understanding an artist doesn't have to create it themselves, even though someone is highly proficient in a medium, doesn't make them able to make a beautiful thing. They can technically do it perfect, but it lacks soul. It's sterile. There's like again, there's, to me, it's like I always see all these like different contradictions. It's like, it's really hard to just make this very easy. It's not easy to say, oh, you do this and this and this. That works for you in that time on that day. And like you're saying, even that same person, take them 2 years later, what's happened in their life? What has transpired that maybe that whole procedure, that exact process, well,
Yeah.
now it needs to change because they've been changed in some way, whether they're even aware of it or
Yeah.
not. Um, yeah,
I
I mean,
mean, in
it's
my
like,
mind, that's like, I have a resistance to those labels of like good and bad art, but in my mind, the work that I think is most successful is when it is an ongoing conversation. Like the stuff that like you can come back to later and you still get something out of it, you know?
absolutely.
Um,
Not not everything that is made is special. Certain, I mean, it's like we were saying, some people will love something and it'll always mean the exact same thing to them, and they
mhm.
appreciate, they enjoy that for them, and that's cool. And someone else, they like something and then they grow up,
Yeah.
they no longer have the same interests, and so the thing doesn't mean as much as it did before. It's to me, one of the things I appreciate, just being able to get something from in my headspace to being tangible. But then at the
Mhm.
same time, we're talking about, well, now you can make it digital. It's like it doesn't have to be something you can physically touch, because it can be, on a computer screen that you
Yeah.
never you just see it, or it is just audible. Evil Dead, the sound of the evil through the woods and the low angle shot of the
Mhm.
camera will always impact me. There's As far as sound goes, hearing the Evil Dead, as soon as I hear that sound, it immediately just puts me on edge, and it's a sensation. It's an experience. That's what I like with art to be, is that, a reaction
Yeah.
of, that's like really interacting with someone. That's, again, like seeing Clay's stuff visually. It just takes me to just more of being a kid. It's just like, to see his stuff is like, man, it's playful. It's, again, he's also meeting those basic primary balance, flow, the stuff that, always has to be there. And it doesn't have to be art. It just needs to be pleasing.
You mentioned Evil Dead. We've been talking now for over an hour, so I'm gonna bring us home here. Um, you're wearing a shirt that says "Let's Summon Demons," right?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure everybody got to see that. And I got a wonderful surprise package from you that was a pillow with little slices of your face and the words "Am I Demon," which you said was the lyric from Danzig, and I was never really into Danzig. I'm sorry, so I didn't catch that. But which was a wonderful mail day. Like, thank you so much. Like, I
You're
can't
welcome.
tell you how much that just like brightened my whole day and week. And,
I'm glad.
in the studio, and it's just like, oh, my friend's here with me. So, um, I just wanted to like acknowledge that very generous gift. And, this was like, I really enjoyed this conversation. We got into some good meaty stuff there. And
Absolutely. And that,
is,
and it's what I expected, because the videos that you've been doing, I mean, I think I've seen all of them so
oh,
far.
good.
And it's obviously each one is different because different artists and everything. But the fact that you're just, hey, I mean, this is, again, this is what I'm familiar with from my group of friends, is that it's like, I've got this idea, I'm just going to do it.
Yeah.
And that is, I think that they've all been going very well. I'm impressed. It's not kid gloves. It's not overcritical. It's comfortable. I mean, just
Good.
like we said, you and I have never, for as long as we've known of each other and been in communication electronically, this is the first time we've talked.
I
And
know. And I've
it's
always been a fan of, I've been in the Marshall fan club, so it's overdue. Um, and I'd like to do more. Like honestly, I'm just like, let's get the gang back together, Like, just talking about all that stuff was so much fun with you. And I really like I have been, it's one of my goals with this to reach out to as many of the former good bad people spread out, so it's not just that, but
oh
like
yeah.
I reconnecting with those people is very important to me, and so I appreciate you taking the time. I hope you don't feel so intimidated by me anymore.
No, I've gotten, especially getting to see the other videos you've done, hearing you talk, and just like, okay, it's that I think helped get me familiar with, if it honestly, if I had never seen any of your other videos, I'd probably still be a
Yeah.
bit more nervous. But like I said, no, the other videos are enjoyable, insightful. They're a good way to spend time.
Well, I appreciate that.
Because I think it's well worth the effort you put into it, and I hope that you continue to. Obviously, there's no lack of potential participants, so I hope that there are many, many more.
Yeah, thanks, Marshall. That's really nice. Um, yeah, that's really nice to hear. And I appreciate you supporting in all the various ways. So